our twice monthly fireside chat, which is hosted by the St. Rose Alumni Association USA. Before we start the conversation today, we're going to have a moment to acknowledge International Women's Day and celebrate the achievements of women Guyanese in the diaspora and around the world. Today's conversation is about repatriation to Guyana, expat to repat, making the transition easy. And we have with us today Fazil Yusuf and Rosalinda Rasul, both from the diaspora unit of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. A quick background on Fazil and Rosalinda. Fazil is the advisor on the investment and diaspora affairs of the government of Guyana at the Guyana Consulate in New York. He was appointed 4 years ago and previously served as the Assistant Commissioner for Health Affairs at the New York City Department of Corrections. Fazil held positions at Corazon Health and Montefiore Medical Center. He holds a master's degree in public administration from Long Island University and a Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Science from Lehman College, City University, New York City. Ms. Rasul is the head of the diaspora unit of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation in Guyana, overseeing diaspora affairs. She has over 12 years of experience in corporate administration, working in various industries and closely with professionals from different fields. Ms. Rasul has been involved in establishing operations, financial planning, crisis management, and reporting to government and international agencies. She's held positions such as CEO of an airline and executive director of the Guyana Manufacturing and Services Association. Currently, she's the chairperson of the Transport and Harbors Department and the director of Kanawaima Ferry Service. Thank you both for taking the time to join us today. Our audience has been excited to have this conversation with you. So, did you want to say a few words before we start asking our questions? So, let me give you an idea what the format is going to be. We've got a pretty big audience here, 24 people. To the audience members, we've only got 45 minutes and you've got a lot of questions. So what I suggest you do is put your questions in the chat. And if the items aren't covered during the conversation, then I will ask those questions on your behalf. Hope that sounds fair.
Great. Thank you so much. And I want to thank the St. Rose's alumni for having me on the program. This is my first engagement with them virtually. And I want to thank Joe also for inviting me to be part of this initiative here, this conversation. I'm very pleased to be here, and I hope that the contributions that we set here or made here by myself and Joe you'll find it very, very helpful. And, you know, we're always here. And before I hand it over, because I know it's just a 45 minutes, I want to wish all the women from on the call a happy International Women's Day. It is very important that we recognize the achievements and accomplishments and many of the battles that have fought over the years to achieve the things that they've achieved. So well done to all of the women there. And again, thank you so much. I look forward to engaging with all of you.
Thank you very much. So I've got a question here. A lot of us in Guyana are getting to the age where you want to start going back home. We've had enough of these long winters. I mean, if you're in New York City, you know, or you're in Toronto, you know what it's like. You've got these 4 months of darkness and cold and snow. So for someone who's considering going back to Guyana, what is the process to remigrate back to Guyana, to take your home items, your car? For us who've left 30, 40 years ago, we have no ID for Guyana anymore. We may have a passport, we may not. So how would we start that process to make the transition smoothly from New York, Toronto, Florida, back to Guyana and reintegrate into the local Guyanese society?
Yeah,
so, you know, I've worked with Rosalind and many of these folks who have applied for remigration status. So one of the first things that anyone who is thinking about coming back to Guyana must do. First, you have to be physically present there in Guyana to file the remigrant application. And they have to come into the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to do that.
Okay.
They will need an interview, but prior to that interview, there are a couple of things that they must have to bring to be presented at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs during that interview. And you know, what I'll do is Rosalinda could probably jump in and kind of highlight some of those documents, you know, like your travel history, but I'll let Rosalinda give us specifically what are the documentations that that person must bring with them when they're coming for the interview at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Great, thank you for that. And to add what Joe is saying there, the government of Guyana has put this process, this scheme together, the remigration scheme together, to make it seamless for persons who are interested in returning to Guyana to do so. Now, the first thing I want to clear up for a lot of your listeners there, Raymond, is that remigration process is not permission to come back and live into Guyana. So they can come and live if they want to because they're Guyanese citizens. And so we respect that. The remigration application process is really to grant concession for those who want to come back to Guyana to live. And that will bring us into some of the questions that you would have in terms later on as to what they can bring. And the process is very simple, actually. So in terms of the criteria, first of all, the person who's returning must be Guyanese by birth, descent, or naturalization. They would have to be 18 years and older at the time of the application. And they would need to have resided overseas legally and consecutively for a minimum of 5 years, just as a migrant. But students, there are two categories of persons who can apply for this concession. It would be just a regular migrant or a student. And for the student, that person would have to be overseas for about 3 years minimum to apply for the concession. And then there's a very important part about this application process, which entails timelines. But before I go into that timelines very quickly, the process of application is twofold. The first part of that application process, as Joe said, starts with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, where the unit that's here will determine who is a qualifying remigrant or a migrant in that. So we are the ones who have that information, that criteria. We do the assessment. Once that is done, given the documents that's submitted, you get an approval letter. And then the second part of that process now entails that applicant having an interview with the GR, the Guyana Revenue Authority, that deals with the concession part of it. So it's a two-part process. Right. Very simple, very straightforward. Submit the documents to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs International Cooperation in the remigration section. They process it. Once that's approved, then you move on to GRE, who now deals with the concessions completely out of our hands. And it's important for persons who are interested in coming back to understand two very key timelines that they have. They have upon returning to Guyana, the first 6 months upon returning to file that application. And then once you get an approval letter, that first 6 months elapses, and then a second 6 month now takes its place, and that's a 6 month that a person has to bring all of the items that they want to bring into Guyana. So that's very, very important for them to bear in mind.
One of the things I want to add to what Rosalinda just said there is that quite frequently, and I have experienced this with individuals, they would go ahead, bring their items in, and then apply for their remigrant status, which is actually doing it backwards. And quite frequently, sometimes they go ahead and do that, and then the items that they bring in do not fit into what will be approved. And as a result, they miss those timelines that Rosalinda just talked about. And when that happens, quite often they get frustrated and upset that, they weren't approved, etc.
But apart from missing the timelines, what is important to note, and Joe raised a very valid point there, is that we do not encourage anyone who is interested in coming to Guyana to ship anything of the concession prior to the approval. You must have the approval first, because there is a misunderstanding, a misconception out there that as long as you're a migrant, then you should automatically get concession. That is not the case. You have to be approved. And they are criteria that are being used by the remigration section to assess your validity or your suitability for that concession. So that's something that must be borne in mind, and why we heavily emphasize on people not to do that. And I'll say something here too, that one of the thing about getting the remigrant status is the word legal. And they have to be legally resident in a host country. And we have seen a few persons who have to ship items to Guyana. Then when they attempted to start a process, or started a process, they had no documents to support that application. And they got the rude awakening when they realized that you're not qualified for it. And therefore the vehicle that you have sitting on the wharf there, or your items, are now subjected to the full tax regime of the GRE. So that's something that needs to be borne in mind.
Okay, so quick question. How long is the application process? So let's say I want to remigrate. Between me sending in documents to the office and getting approved, how long is that process normally?
You'd be very pleased to know that it could be as fast as 7 days.
Right.
or
Wow.
at maximum 14 days, but most people have gotten it within the 7 days.
It's not a
Okay.
long, drawn-out process where you wait weeks and weeks and weeks. As Rosalind rightfully said, within 7 to 14 days, you could complete that entire process of the application process.
Now, you mentioned people who have parents who were born in Guyana, but they themselves weren't born in the country. Now, if your parents are deceased, what would you need to provide to show your Guyanese-ness in order to remigrate and take advantage of the concessions?
Okay, I actually deal with that every day in New York. So if you were born overseas to Guyanese parents, born Guyanese,
Mhm.
there's a two-part process for that. One, you first have to go into your nearest consulate and you're actually applying for your foreign overseas registration, which means that you have to bring the birth certificate for at least one of your parents who is Guyanese, and your birth certificate, the original. You have a face-to-face interview with the consulate in the respective country you're going to, and they will actually start the processing for your overseas registration. That could be anywhere from 6 weeks to 3 months for that to happen. Once that is approved, then you can apply for a Guyanese passport legally. And once that is done, then you actually can, if you're looking to migrate back to Guyana or want to migrate to Guyana, then that process starts as we discussed or described.
Okay.
earlier.
You've got a couple of questions here in the chat. The first question is, can you list the documents that are required to start the remigration process?
Yes, there's quite a lot. One of the things that I can do, Ray, is I can also circulate after this session here a list of those items basically. But what I'm going to do, I'm just going to call at just some of the key ones. I'm not going to call
Okay,
all of
thank
them
you.
because what is important is that this application process is a physical process. Therefore, the intended remigrant will have to present himself or herself to the remigration officer for them to do an interview with that person. Now, at that point, they will be given the application form as well as the list of documents that they must submit, and that is where the officer will determine what are, excuse me, what are the required documentation that remigrant would have to present. So I don't want to give something that may apply to one or may not apply to one. I'll give you the general process, application process or documents that may be needed. So for example, like you'll need to have your birth certificate that will prove your Guyanese citizenship, things like deed poll or marriage certificate, particularly if a woman's name is changed. You must have your travel records. That's going to be important
The last 5 years.
for the last 5
5
years.
years.
Now, what that means is that you'll be given a letter, sort of a cover letter from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that you have to take to the Central Immigration and Passport Office for them to be the one to issue to Ministry of Foreign Affairs that for the past 5 years, what your travel history was like. That is very important. And I need to say this because a lot of persons have actually been disqualified from getting the concession, not coming back to live, but from getting the concession as a result of what the history showed. Because there are people who have been here in country for about 3-4 years consecutively, which means that they're not really living overseas. They're already taking up residence here, and therefore they're not qualified. Because one of the determinant things, and the remigration office does that, is that it is able to assess how much time you spent in Guyana versus how much you spent outside of Guyana. And if within the last 5 years you've been in Guyana for about 4 to 5, 3-4 years, it's actually like an instant disqualification. We've seen cases, for example, where the travel record shows somebody coming in 2022 and never left until 2024. So that indicates that, this person's been living here all the time, and that goes against the criteria that says you have within the first 6 months upon returning to the country to file that application.
That's very important to know. We've got another question here. This person is asking, you mentioned concessions a few times. What exactly are those concessions?
So actually, the concessions, as Rosalind pointed out, once they're approved, then they have to go to GRA. They will list all of the items, whether it's personal items, whether it's a vehicle that they want to bring, etc., back to the country. Then it will be GRA who will look at that list and make a determination what will be approved or not approved. That's the list that will be used by the individuals, the approved list of items by the Guyana Revenue Authority to bring back whatever items to the country.
Correct.
Okay,
So
so
GRA is a custodian of the full list of items that a
Right.
person can bring. To be quite honest, we will not be able to tell you all the details of what those items are, but it can be categorized into personal and household items, meaning you can literally empty your house and bring it
Mhm.
here. And including into your personal and household item is one vehicle.
Wow.
And that's a very important thing, the one vehicle, because what is more interesting is there'll be some changes in terms of the vehicle that you can bring in, that you get it to bring in a very high CC vehicle. It can be brand new, and then you can either bring a vehicle you have overseas into Guyana. You can buy one from a foreign dealer and ship it to Guyana, or you can buy it within Guyana. You get the concession on the vehicle, basically. So that's important. But in terms of the household items, you know, your general things that are in your house, we advise people to list it. And when you go to GRA, they're the ones who are going to determine, yes, this can come in. No, this is not a household item. Like somebody wanted to bring in a cement mixer, saying that that's a house. I'm like, I don't think a cement
Right.
mixer
Is
is a household item. So didn't get
so
to on it.
so is
So
that one car per person or one car per household?
per household,
It's the
Okay,
application. So
Yeah.
again, that'll be determined by GRA. So I don't want to give it there until the
Okay.
application is put
So
there.
those are some of the
GRA will be able to
misconceptions
guide
actually
it.
that we hear
Yeah.
actually.
so
We
Ray,
hear
one
that
of the
is
things that a lot of people get away with is that when you bring that vehicle into the country, you have to maintain it in your name for a certain amount of years, and I think it's 3 years. Some people
okay.
bring in their vehicle and some think that they could sell it right after that, and that's
Mhm.
where you're going to be subjected to the full duty that you were supposed to pay initially. So I don't want people to get off this and have the idea that they could remigrate, bring their vehicle in, and after a couple of months, they could sell it. You have to have it in your possession for the minimum of 3 years. If you bring it in and then you violate that remigrant status of spending much more time out of the country, then that will count of you against you also. So you have to be continuously living in the country during that time frame that you own the vehicle before you could sell it.
And that makes a lot of sense. Now, is there any limitation whether because left-hand drive or right-hand drive?
No,
It doesn't matter whether it's
no,
kilometers or miles per hour. So there's no restriction
no.
on the type of vehicle.
It's a matter of preference for people, because what we found, particularly in the more mature or Asian group of people, they would prefer to even buy the vehicle here because we do the right-hand drive versus the left-hand drive. And, you know,
Mhm.
they don't want to get confused on the road. But there is nothing that says that you have to have it as a right-hand, or it's more of your preference, whichever one you want.
Okay.
And we
Okay.
can tell the American vehicles, because the big gas guzzling heavy vehicles are all left-hand drive, basically. So we can tell that's a remigrant, all right.
Yeah.
Okay. We have another question here. Now, this one may be for your office. This is more of an investment question. If an investor is approaching with a real estate opportunity in Guyana, what are some of the questions and items you should investigate before investing? Because some folks
Yeah.
are coming back as remigrants, but they're coming back not only just live in Guyana, but to establish businesses. So is that something your office also handles?
So a lot of times people come to you and say, what can I invest in? And I would always tell people, I'm sure Roslinda gets this question quite frequently also. I may tell you to go invest into something that you're not comfortable about, or you don't know nothing about, or whatever the case might be. You know, so that person has to know what they're comfortable about, the area of their expertise. What is it that they're looking to come and invest in? I could tell you go drill for oil. That's not your expertise. You want to open a restaurant because you have a restaurant in New York or Canada or wherever the case might be. That's your comfort zone. So first of all, I tell people, whatever investments you come in here to do, make sure you have some kind of knowledge base, make sure something you're comfortable with, something that you know what you're doing. Second thing I tell people to do, come to Guyana, get a feel of the land, experience it firsthand. What do they do? What are the don'ts? What are, you know, that you think that you may have to look at before you come here to do your investment? You know, one of the other biggest misconception that people have is that they feel that they come here and that the government will give them a free building or a free land or whatever the case might be. There is no such thing. There's nothing free. You would have to pay if the government approve you for land or whatever the case might be. You will have to pay for it. However, the one thing I tell everyone who looking to come back and invest in here is to make sure, do what we all want to get done, to streamline and make stuff done consistently, is to do proposal. Submit it to Go Invest. Let them look at it, because you might be looking for certain concessions yourself in terms of machinery, equipment, and all of that stuff that you want to bring in with you. And that's where Go Invest, but also look at the list as similar to what we talked about on a remigrant status, and tell you what are some of the things that you might be qualified for in a business that you're bringing in to get some kind of tax exemption or break or whatever the case might be. So it's a formal process that everyone must follow in terms of coming back here, wanting to do business, looking to get some kind of benefits in terms of tax exemptions, etc. The old thing of someone coming and say, oh, I know this person here, or I know that person there, and I'm going to go talk to them. Don't go down that route, because when things go wrong, which often would go wrong, it's the same folks who didn't want to follow the process, but want to just go and think that they know someone they could talk to and bypass the system.
And if I may add to what Joe is saying, he's right there. Go Invest, which is the Office for Investment in Guyana, they do the business element of what we do at Foreign Affairs. We do the concession processing application for individuals. Go Invest does this for the business or the potential investor, basically. So when you go to Go Invest with a proposal, they're going to assess that proposal to see whether it falls within the ambits of the law, in terms of businesses that are entitled to concessions. If they grant you that letter, that approval, again, it goes back to GRA, who is the authority vested in law, that law puts the power in to execute or to implement those concessions. And so one of the things you need to bear in mind, particularly for diaspora investors, basically, it's not every business or every investment is entitled to concessions. So that's the first thing. And sometimes people think that just because you bring a proposal and, you know, sometimes it could be a very small scale business, may not necessarily qualify for concessions. And one of the things that we've constantly seen in the unit is a lot of, particularly the diaspora, that come here, they have fantastic ideas of things that they want to do in country. And then we will facilitate as many meetings that they can gather the information on. And then at the end of it all, then they'll ask about how do we get financing for this here particularly. So some of the things that I need to bear in mind is, as Joe rightly said, you need to come down here and get a feel of the country and the climate, the investment climate. There are so many opportunities, and this is not a cliche. This is not a marketing gimmick, basically. There are indeed a lot of opportunities here in all the sectors for persons who are interested in doing that. The problem that we found is that there is very little research being done into what is it you really want to do? What is your capital that you're looking to invest, basically? Is it you want a low-hanging fruit? You want to try something very big? And those are the things that I need to look at and talk to authorities, get a feel of it, and then follow the process. It becomes very easy. Right now, we're implementing Health in a Diaspora group family from Guyanese Canadian family. They're investing in a $3 million golf course project. We helped them they had a proposal. We sent it up to the relevant authorities. They spoke to all the different people. They were able to get registered. And right now they've got the Canadian golf developer that's on the land, that's doing the rough layout of the ground. So, and that's just one of many examples. So there'll be many, many successful cases once people do the right thing in terms of coming on the ground, get a feel of it, know what you really want to do, and then put all the procedures, follow the procedures, put all the documents in place, and the opportunities will be yours.
Trying to take a shortcuts is where you get yourself into trouble. And it happens most of the time.
And that's the case in anywhere in the world you go. I mean, I have seen a lot of success stories myself, having visited periodically. You've got another question here, and I think you may have answered part of this question in the early part of the conversation. This person is asking, how many trips to Guyana would you have to make to get the entire processing done? And I think you said it was 7 to 14 days to get the approval.
Right.
So one trip can probably do it then. If you come and you spend, 3 weeks or 2 weeks, you should be able to get everything done during that time. And then, the documents will vary based on that particular person's circumstances. Now, housing, right? If you left Guyana several years ago, Georgetown has changed significantly. The whole country has changed. As a remigrant, we've seen the city. It's now a very busy city. We've got a lot of cars, a lot of traffic, a lot of, neighborhoods have evolved. what are the recommendations from you for someone coming back? Should you come back and rent a place temporarily and get a feel of where you want to be? Or should you look at buying a property before you settle in and, make or build a property without really understanding where in Guyana, where in Georgetown, or where in region 4 or 5 or 6 or 3 you really want to be? Like, what would be your advice in that situation?
Well, for most people, and I think we had this discussion before, is that many people, when they come back to Guyana, would prefer to go back to the village or the area where they come from, because that's what they remembered, that's what they know, and they have a comfort zone in the village that they went to. However, as you rightfully said before, they should come to Guyana. They should visit that area that they think that they have in their mind where they want to go. If it's the area where they grew up in, take a look at it. If you feel comfortable and that's the area you want, then you proceed to the next step, which is, should I rent first? Am I going to build a house? How long is it going to take? Do I have the finance to do it, etc.? So that's probably the first part. Sometimes, and a lot of times it happens also, you go back to the village where you came from and you said, you know what, this is not what I want to go back to right now. And you go into a different area and you see it's much more developed, much more to what you see in New York or Canada, whatever the case might be. And you said, you know what, I could live here. And that is okay also. So you live or you go and you make that decision based on your affordability, your comfort level, your likeness, and you make that determination. Do I rent first, get accustomed to the way of life back in Guyana until I adjust? And then afterwards, if you feel like this is where you're going to settle for a long term or going to be here for a long term, then you decide in building, and you may come out initially and just build something, and then a year after is, this is not what I wanted, this is not where I want to be, and then you want to change, and it's not as easy as that because you've already invested a lot of money in terms of building, etc. So as I said before, come back, get your feet wet, get a comfort level, and then you make those kind of calls. It's the same way if you go to the US or Canada, where if the case might be, you don't go to the first place you land in overseas and live there. You go and you in a certain area, and then as you get comfortable and you get a better appreciation for where it is, you move on to different areas. I think many of us who live abroad, that's what happened to us.
One of the things, sorry, Joe.
Sure.
Sorry. One of the things that we've observed with persons from the diaspora that's returning is the ones who've been coming over frequently over the years are the ones who are more acclimatized to what's happening in the country, what's the lifestyle like, what are the procedures for doing things basically, and how to get things done. But the ones who've been away for a very long time, 15-20-year gap between their first and the last visit, or the second and third visit, they're the ones that tends to be a little more they struggle a little bit more in terms of understanding how things work and how can we get stuff done. With respect to housing, actually, there are different ways in which you can get a house. As Joe says, for many who would have returned and they have their familial ties back to their ancestral land or their homeland, they go back to their little villages, they've got their home still standing there, so they renovate that and to take up occupancy, and that's pretty good. We encourage people to to look at that, because that's critical before remigrating, because we've seen persons who literally bought their stuff here, and you ask them, where are you storing your stuff? And they're like, we don't really have a place right now to put them. Like, we tend to encourage people to go ahead and make sure you have some sort of accommodation before you bring your stuff in, because you don't want to have problems for storage at the wharf, and they're going to levy all of that. So you have your homeland. You also have, you can actually buy off the private market, which is through real estate agents or private individuals. So that option is always available. We've seen a few persons who've come back, who've gone that route. And of course, the most popular one would have been the ones who are applying for house lots through the government subsidized program. That's where they acquire the lots, they build their house on it, basically. But then there are also the young professional homes, or the turnkey homes, which a lot of persons are actually going after, because these are the ones that are already built by the government. It's easy financing to get those sorted out. All of that requires an application to the Central Housing and Planning Authority for persons to get it. So those are some of the ways and means by which you can acquire land and house here in Guyana, or basically take care of your residency before you remigrate.
Okay, so can that process for applying for house lots in the remigration scheme, can that be done remotely overseas, or you have to come
Yes,
back into the country?
It's they've actually, Central Housing Plan has made a provision for persons online
Online.
through the Central Housing Plan. But what is important for those who are applying online, even for those who are doing a physical application, is when you submit your application, you get an acknowledgement that you've submitted the application. That does not mean that your application is clear. You have to do an interview first. And that interview, for those who are living overseas and can't make it here, you can actually request for them to do that interview remotely. And so they're able to facilitate that. So when that application goes and you get the acknowledgement, make a request to Central Housing Plan that I'd like to complete my, or I'll be in the country another 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I'll come in and do the interview. Or can I do a Zoom interview with you and they'll facilitate it.
So let me just interject what Rosalind just said there. One of the biggest things that happen, and I experienced it with a lot of folks, and then they'll come to me, is that they come here, they apply for the house lot, give a local address, give a local telephone number intentionally, okay, and then they leave. So when the housing authority or divisions call now for that interview, the number that they give locally here, person doesn't answer, or if they answered the phone, say, well, he or she is not here. Okay, and when you miss that appointment, it's very difficult. It creates a lot of difficulties thereafter, because here you are, you come in here, you actually put the local telephone number, local address that give the perception that you're living in Guyana, when in essence you're not. And then they leave and go overseas. But what Rosalinda said, if you are upfront and you identify yourself as a individual who's living overseas, you want to be having that video interview done with you, I think it's much more straightforward to get it done. Some folks believe that if they use the local number and the local address, they'll get through faster. And that they will, for some reason, be able to beat the system. Just tell you.
Well, I guess honesty is the best policy.
Yes. So don't fall into that trap.
Yeah. I've got another question here. This may be a little more technical. This person is asking, what's the cost of living like in Guyana? And I guess in comparison to living in Canada or the US.
I'm sorry, I didn't get it clearly. What's the cost?
What's the cost of living?
Oh.
Yeah.
Let me answer you that, because I could actually tell you I live in both places.
Okay, thank you.
So a lot of it has to do with what you are accustomed to do. If you want to live the same level of life you have in the US, then be prepared to spend the same money here. Because if you want to have your air conditioner running 24 hours a day, and you want a fancy vehicle, and you want to go to eat in restaurants every day, that costs money. If you want a simple lifestyle where you're going to be cooking at home, you could do with opening the windows, you're not having an extravagant lifestyle, you can. One thing I will tell you though, overall, it's probably, especially if you have decent income coming in from overseas, or not even, your retirement money or your Social Security money, and you have a place here already, you could be doing very well. You could live comfortable. You may not have all of the niceties and the extravagant lifestyle you have overseas, but you can still afford it, very comfortable living here.
Okay. I'm going to be very specific, right? Knowing that the average pension in North America is between $3,000 to $4,000 a month, US, is that enough monthly income to maintain a comfortable lifestyle in Guyana if you already own your home?
I will answer
Very
you.
much.
Yes.
By far.
Yes.
Okay.
By a
I
very
think that
much.
answers the question that was asked by the audience.
Yes.
We got a few minutes left. I told you the time goes very, very fast. We've got about 8 or 9 minutes left, actually, but 8 minutes left, actually. Pensions. There are a lot of guys who left Guyana in their 20s or 30s, and they may have worked a few years in Guyana. They may work longer periods of time. Are returning Guyanese eligible for what they call, is it NIS pension? Is it NIS? Or is it social? What's the equivalent?
If I may, so
Rosalinda can speak,
yes.
because we did an outreach recently in Guyana last year, where this was actually a very, very hot topic and a very high demand need in the diaspora. So, and Rosalinda came up there when we had the outreaches, and
There are two types of pensions in Guyana,
Okay.
basically. So the first one refers to the work pension, which is the NIS or the National Insurance Scheme.
Okay.
That one there is not automatic for everyone. There's a qualifying criteria for it. You have to have worked at least or a minimum of 15 years and made about 700, not about, you have to make
700.
minimum 750 contributions in order to qualify for a pension. So for a person who would have worked for some years in Guyana and they're not sure if they're qualified for a pension, my advice would be for them to get in contact with the NIS, and then they'll be able to look up the records to see what are the years of contribution and determine whether they are entitled to a pension. Many of them have been able to get their pension, or whether they're entitled to just a one-off payment because they did not reach that qualifying criteria in order to get a pension. So that's the first one. The second one is one that is available to all Guyanese as long as you reach the age of 65. And that's like the old age, we call it the old age pension. And I
Okay.
believe that is the one that a lot of the diaspora have been able to access basically. However, there's not really a qualifying, but there's a criteria for them to access it because a lot of them have been out of the country for such a long time. The requirement is that a person who's returning to Guyana must live at least 2 years in country before you can access that pension, more or less. So that way, you know, we want to make sure that there's integrity and there's transparency in the issuing of that pension to somebody. Not that they come here, spend a vacation, and then apply for the pension, and then, you know, they're really not here. It's really for persons who are living here, but it's the diaspora is not excluded from it once they satisfy that criteria of being here for minimum 2 years in that remigration process.
So is that 2 years consecutively, or can I spend 6 months, come back normally
2
for 6
years
months?
consecutively.
Consecutive living.
Okay, so you guys spend, okay. We've got another land question. I mean, I think land is a hot topic now. This person is asking if they already own a home in Guyana, but it's not appropriate for what they want to do, where they want to live. Can they still qualify for one of the remigration lots through the Central Housing and Planning Authority?
No,
No,
Okay.
as
So
long as you own a land,
Right.
yes.
yeah, so
But
it's a
they
first
can buy it in the
home
private
ownership program.
market.
Okay.
Yeah, they can buy it off the private market, but not through the government scheme.
Okay.
you know, it's for people who have never owned anything in Guyana or do not have anything in Guyana that could fit that qualification to apply for it. So
Okay.
if
And that makes sense. Healthcare. You know, we're returning as elderly folks. Some folks may have health conditions, some folks may not. What are the concerns, if any, for a remigrant in terms of adequate health care while they're in Guyana? Are there any concerns?
Well, the government of Guyana is spending a lot of funds right now in enhancing the healthcare system in Guyana. There are quite a few new hospitals that have actually being built right now that will come aboard very, very soon. The question a lot of folks from the diaspora would have, is it the same quality of healthcare that you would get in the US or Canada, etc.? If you have significant medical problems, the healthcare system here can provide the care that is necessary for you to treat whatever ailment you have, etc. Of course, we're not up to par like North America. Is it getting there? The answer is yes. Right now, they could do, you know, many folks many years ago could not even get dialysis here. Now you have dialysis centers all over the place where you can receive your dialysis. Open heart surgery, which was never done in Guyana, you know, is being done here, both by physicians who were trained abroad and those who might have been trained here and gotten their education further in their specialties. So yes, the healthcare system here is decent, where you can actually get the services that you need, but sometimes people do want a little bit more, and in those cases, if you could afford it, then you go overseas. But as a whole, the healthcare system is good. Is it going to get better? The answer is yes. And the access is another thing where the government is putting a lot of hospitals in areas that never had one before. So the access will get better.
So just to add a little bit more, and I think that it's a very important question that's been asked there, because in our engagement, a lot of, particularly the more Asian diaspora, their first question is Medicare. How do we get that, basically? And very soon, sometime this year, you're going to see several brand new hospitals being commissioned. And next year, I think there's a total between 8 to 12. And the government's intention here is to, one, have world-class healthcare for its Guyanese citizen. And second one would be also to do medical tourism, where persons from around the world can come here and access really good quality healthcare. Now, for that to be your ultimate objective, tells you that your standard, your quality, and your expertise in the medical field has to be on top, really at a very high level. So within a very, very, very short period of time, you're going to see the healthcare that a lot of the diaspora are actually accustomed to will be done right here in Guyana. But for the interim, you do have satisfactory healthcare being done here. I mean, I use the healthcare system. You have the public and the private sector that it provides health care, basically. And then a lot of persons we've seen would go back from time to time to do their medicals from their host country.
That's very good to know. Now we're almost out of time. Do you have time for one more question?
Certainly, we could sit here if you want us to sit here for much longer. My afternoon is free.
Okay, well, I have two questions actually. And this one's a very quick answer. What's the average amount of the old age pension?
The average old age pension.
Yeah, what's the average payment per month?
I think it's recently increased. So I think it would be the 30 something. Let me just verify that.
40,000.
Okay.
Would have increased about 41, I think, but let me just verify that. It's not according for the diaspora, may not be as attractive as
Well, I mean, if you've got a pension from Canada and a pension from your job, then an extra 200 US can go a long way. So it all adds up.
Yes.
I think it's like 40,000.
Yeah, I think it's about there. I just want to make sure that they had it this year, but the budget.
It just went up this year in the most recent budget.
Yeah, I just want to give you, we can take a second one in the meantime. Let me just verify that.
My question is, I know for a lot of people who are returning is crime. And when I say crime, I'm talking crime of opportunity, right? Where if you here in North America, you're accustomed to, being very lax with how you treat your personal property. What are some of the things we can do as a remigrant to not fall prey to crime of opportunity? Like, what are a few tips for us?
So I'll tell you, right? And it doesn't matter which country you go to. Okay, there are certain things that you must do. There are certain precautions that you must take. There are certain things you do that you don't do, and those same precautions you should take when you come here. Even when you live in the US, you're not gonna walk in, certain areas with all your jewelry and walk at certain areas during the night and all that stuff there. You come back here, you could fit in. You take the security precautions. Don't go out there and flaunt your jewelry and try to be different from people, and you will be identified. People know that if you act that way, you're gonna be identified as not one person that live here. So as individuals, you have to take certain precautions yourself, just like you would take any place else you go. I come here all the time. I've never had a problem with crime. Because why? I follow simple guidelines. I don't go out there and be reckless. I don't go into areas that I'm not supposed to be in. I don't go out and act stupidly or to show off for what they would call it down here. I don't do that. Be simple, take the precautions, and you'll be okay. But if you don't, then crime is everywhere. Crime is everywhere, whether you're here in Guyana, whether you're here in the US, or whatever the case might be. There's crime all over the place. But you must take precautions in terms of crime prevention for yourself, your family, etc.
So Ray, what I'm going to do very quickly, I'm going to be a little bit of a different one here, because I know you're coming on to wrap up time here. I've actually seen a few questions pop up there, but in less than a minute, I'm going to answer all of that basically.
Yeah. Okay.
The old-age pension effective from January 1, 2025 is 41,000 Guyana dollars, closer to $200 US basically. Okay. So that's for old-age pension. One you get automatically. Secondly, in terms of the question of security, And this is through analysis, basically, and comparative analysis. Guyana is a safe country, believe it or not. And when you compare us to countries like in Trinidad or other countries where it's very high, the murder rate per capita it's amazingly high. Guyana, we don't have. However, you do have your pockets of little crime taking place here or there, which is not something that's out of control. But once you take precaution, as Joe would have outlined, I'm not going to say what this precaution he dealt with it. You're pretty okay. You can walk the streets. There's nothing wrong. You can wear your drill in certain locations. That's fine. It is pretty much safe, and we have not seen that incident or that report in terms of the crime. And it's unfortunately it was one of the biggest bugbear and misinformation we've had to combat repeatedly over years, because we are a small society. A little thing goes wrong there, and then it gets blown up basically. But when you do the analysis, it's actually very different, right? I've seen two quick ones there I'm going to answer. One, somebody asked a question in terms of if there is a specific location for remigrants. That's for house lot. The answer is there was previously a remigration housing scheme that is filled. We're not creating anymore. What this government is doing right now is allocating primarily high income lots for the returning Guyanese, basically, and that's exactly like the remigrant scheme, basically. So you're in a certain bracket, more or less, and you're entitled to that one there, right? And then I think somebody asked a question in terms of there was another one that I just popped up there around the last one.
That's the one of safety, but accidents and driving.
Accidents and drivers. So right now the government has this amazing program of a smart country, and that includes looking at the roadways. We are starting to see speed cameras up there. You're going to issue tickets, basically, and so it's becoming more digitalized. So very soon, once the roads are all done, as we want the highways are done, so you can have greater access to move from place to place, which would of itself will reduce some of the carnage and of course some of the recklessness that we're seeing on the road. That will be very helpful, but there are actual measures in place to make it safer through digitalization and the use of technology, and of course increasing the penalties that will help curb some of the mayhem on the road. So we're getting there.
We are, and I can validate much of what you said, having spent a lot of time in Guyana. I have never felt unsafe there. I walk around freely. I guess it's normal for people coming back who haven't been in Guyana for an extended period of time. I mean, if you follow everything you see on the social media and your online news, it can really scare the hell out of you. I go into the market frequently, but you have to be careful. You've got to exercise caution. You've got to be aware of your surroundings. Not be open to have an extensive conversation with everybody you meet. You know what I mean? You have to be very discerning in who you talk to and what you tell people, and that's anywhere in the world. So,
and the other thing, Ray, is that everyone now is a reporter.
Yeah, you got that right.
Everyone has a camera. The most minuscule thing happen, it gets on social media. It gets blown out of proportion.
Yeah.
You may have the same thing happen in the US and you never hear about it.
Yeah.
But everything is kind of.
We had an incident at our home in Guyana over the just during Christmas. It was an unfortunate incident, and I take responsibility for that incident because we didn't do the necessary precautions to secure ourselves properly. And once we took those precautions, I don't foresee anything happening again. So I'm not worried about that sort of stuff. And when it happened, when the breach occurred, it's something that I neglected to do myself. You know what I mean? Because time didn't permit me to do it before I left Guyana the last time. So, but no, I'm not concerned with stuff like that. But anyway, guys, thank you so very much for spending this time with us. You shared a lot of information. I knew we probably didn't get through as much as we wanted to, but I'm pretty sure that the association would love to have you back if you're available. If we can touch on a lot more subjects. I know there's folks who want to talk about, getting into the whole investment process and doing investments in Guyana. So perhaps if it's something that you can cover, or that we have to get a party from Go Invest to speak about, we can probably do that. But Fazal and Rosalinda, thank you very much for spending Saturday with us. I look forward to being back in Guyana, and do enjoy the great weather there. For some of us are in some chilly places. I'm not. I'm actually in Florida. But some of the folks on this call are up in New York, New Jersey, and Toronto, and some quite chilly places. So you can send them a bit of Guyanese love and some sunshine, and probably some Guyanese rum punch to warm them up.
If I may say something for you, Andre, Guyana has, for those who have not been here in many years, when you come here, you are going to be astonished at what you see. It is not the same country that you've left. lifestyles are changing, the infrastructure and landscapes are changing, the demographics are changing. It's amazing. And I'm not saying that because, you know, it sounds like the right thing to, I live here, we're seeing it, and we're amazed at what's taking place in this country.
Thank you
You're
very much,
entitled,
and do
you're
enjoy the
welcome to
rest of your.
enjoy it too.
Yep. Thanks a lot, guys.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.